Hey, Walt here from StogieReview.com with another video cigar review. And much like a lot of the videos that I've done over the last couple of months, I've got something that really isn't anything new. And actually it is quite old. It's no longer in production, and the chances of you walking into a cigar shop and finding, like a dusty bundle tucked away on a long forgotten shelf are virtually zero. So I really wasn't quite sure whether it was worth putting a video together for this or not, but I was feeling kind of nostalgic, and I came across a cigar and I was really surprised that I even had any left from way back when I bought them. So I thought, it'll be kind of fun. I'll turn on the camera and we'll talk about this sort of long forgotten cigar. I'm sure that this brand is still available. It's just been reblended and repackaged probably numerous times since this original came out. So before I get to telling you what the cigar is, I want to kind of take you on a little bit of a story from how I remember the cigar and how I came to purchase the cigar. But before I do that, let's talk a little bit about the construction of the cigar and get started with the lighting process, so that I'm not standing here or actually sitting here rambling on and on and on about the makeup of the cigar and how I know of it, only to kind of stop in the middle of the story and then start the whole lighting and clipping process. So first and foremost, this is a torpedo-shaped cigar. I believe this is some sort of Robusto format. I believe it was called a Robusto at the time, even though it is torpedo-shaped. It's actually, I think it's a Bellicoso. But it is slightly rounded. It's got like a really gentle sort of press, and it makes it oblong. Sort of similar to like the Oliva Master Blends, like the Master Blend 3s have a sort of an oblong shape to them. The coloring on the cigar is kind of mottled. There's a lot of dark splotches throughout the wrapper, mostly around the foot. The veins are fairly small. There aren't any that really stand out. The construction seems kind of decent, except for I whacked a little where the leaf wraps the cigar. I must have just nicked a seam with my finger, and I kind of chipped a little piece of the wrapper. Fortunately, we're going to be cutting that off anyway. But the cigar seems really solid, constructed well. It's got some weight to it. It's kind of surprisingly heavy. So we'll kind of get this thing clipped and get it lit, and then we can start talking all this nonsense that you probably don't even need to know about. But it's my review. Piece of wrapper. And I can do what I want to. Even as I said that, it sounded childish, but we're going to run with it anyway. The pre-light draw's got a little bit of resistance to it. It's got a kind of a fruity cold draw, or a cold taste. But so far so good. So now that all that's kind of out of the way, so how did I come to know this cigar? Well, back around 2006, I was a member of Club Stogie. It was an old cigar forum that has since been purchased and rolled into a big giant conglomerate, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's nothing like it used to be, and I have virtually no interest in it whatsoever at this point, or the people that bought it. But way back when, it used to be a fantastic cigar forum. It was very active and just a great community. It was one of many cigar forums that were very active at the time, with a large membership base. And it was just kind of where I called home. And this cigar forum was kind of where I got my feet wet in terms of trading and things like that. They ran a number of box passes and trades, especially for newer members to the community, and it was an opportunity to try a lot of cigars that I wasn't able to get locally. And this community, like a lot of others, it had trends. When a new cigar came out, and it sort of if it did well within the community, everyone started buying it. So if you had maybe a half a dozen people say, hey, you know, I found this cigar, it costs so much money and I really like it, you should give it a try, you know, the community kind of piled on, depending on who these, you know, half dozen people were. If they were someone established in the community, you know, everyone just sort of like dived on this cigar and bought it up. Well, one of the things the community was good for was value line cigars. So anything under $3 or $4 usually got talked about quite a bit. So one day I'm on the forum and I hear about this new cigar. It's, you know, it's like $2, $3, something like that. And they're being sold in bundles. They're unbanded. There's, you know, there's no packaging fees associated with it. There's no box. It's just a cellophane bundle, and they're going for, I don't know, maybe $30 a bundle, something like that. And they were coming with free shipping. They were a house blend or house brand for Famous Smoke Shop, and they were the Famous Nicaraguan 3000s. Now, when the cigar came out, it was labeled as, you know, once these are done, they're done. We were only able to get, you know, a lot of X number of cigars, and, you know, we're selling them off. And the story behind it was, there was a brand owner or a company that decided they wanted to have cigars made. So they went to a manufacturer to have them done. In the case of the story, which has been partially verified, was Oliva. So Oliva began producing these cigars for this other company who was going to distribute them, and this other company released them as something along the lines of X. They were some sort of X cigar. Well, they came out, they started selling, and then at some point Fuente got involved because they felt as though there was a sort of a trademark issue with their Opus X. Well, the cigar kind of died out, and Oliva was left with, I don't know, a lot of unbanded cigars. And I guess in an attempt to move some older stock, Famous bought them up and started selling them at a discount. And that's where the Famous Nicaraguan 3000s came from. At the time, there was no mention of Oliva or anything like that. It was just sort of, we bought these from unknown company, and you know, we're selling them as is. And they did really, really well. The community went nuts for them. They were inexpensive. People were buying them like crazy. I bought 2 or 3 bundles, and even if this was one of those cigars that even if you didn't like it, you were still buying it anyway, because you knew that you could trade it for something that you did like. So you'd get people that were buying 5-packs, that were buying bundles, and then later on, when the numbers started dipping down low and people were having trouble getting them, you know, they were offering them up for trade. Okay, I've got a 5-pack of the Famous Nic 3000s, or I've got a bundle of the Famous Nic 3000s, I'm looking for such and such, and you would see all kinds of trades going back and forth. And the cigar did really well within the community. I thought it was fantastic for the money. Eventually, the supply dried up, and they were done. Well, they were done, sort of. Like anything in the cigar community, when something is really, really popular, even though they can only get so much tobacco, or, you know, they've only got such and such an allotment of something, they somehow find more. So after the first batch is done, I guess the demand was still there, and Famous decides they're going to acquire some more. Don't know how they did it, what the whole process was, but they came out with the Famous Nicaraguan 3000s again. This was what was being called the second batch by the cigar community. So people went nuts, started buying them up again, and people didn't think they tasted as good. They were close enough for the money, but, you know, they weren't quite as good. And much like the first batch, eventually they all sold out. And the second batch was supposed to be, you know, kind of once and done, just an extension of the first, and they disappeared. Now, There was a third batch, however, I don't remember whether it was like a third batch or a fourth batch, but they started putting bands on them that said Famous Nicaraguan 3000s. When it got to that point, I wasn't buying them anymore. I moved on to something else. But interest started falling off because the cigars weren't the cigars were getting further and further away from what they were initially. And I guess initially they were leftovers from a run of cigars for someone else that could no longer produce them due to legal battles with Fuente. So the cigar was massively popular, and then over time it started to taper off as the blend was changing from batch to batch to batch. And eventually they sort of just fell off the map in terms of the community. And I still had some cigars left over. I've been smoking them here and there, but it's been well over a year since I've had one. And when I saw what I'm assuming is my very last one, I thought, you know, it'd be really cool to break this cigar out and actually smoke it for, you know, for old time's sake, see if it's as good as I remember it being. But at any rate, we're still in the early stages. I'm having a little bit of difficulty keeping the cigar burning properly. I don't feel like I'm getting a full mouthful of smoke with each puff. So rather than talk about this little bit that I'm having a little bit of trouble with because it feels kind of watered down, I'm going to take a break. I'll come back once I get, you know, some more cigar burned away and I get into sort of the meat and potatoes of the cigar, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more and sort of do a breakdown from there. So you just got almost a 12-minute introduction on this cigar, and I really didn't tell you anything about it. I think that has to be some sort of record for me. So sit tight and I'll be right back. Well, it's been about 15-20 minutes now, and I'm having some issues with this cigar. As you can see, sort of, I can't really lean into the camera so you can get really focused on the cigar, but the ash is kind of ugly. It's flowering quite a bit. It's pulling away from the core of the ash. The burn line is pretty bad. It's really erratic, and for a little while up front I wasn't getting a whole lot of smoke out of the cigar. Now if you watched Mike's review of that Monte Cristo New York recently, he had an issue where there was a portion of the cigar that was burning and it got really hard. I think at one point in the video he actually was rapping it against the ashtray and you can hear it ringing. I had something similar happen. It wasn't massive and sticking out of the cigar like Mike's was, but it was fairly small and it was just kind of like a chunk of charcoal in there. I've had this problem every now and again. It's not something that really concerns me too much anymore these days, but it causes the cigar to taste a little funky, and you don't get a full puff of smoke out of it. It seems kind of airy, and the smoke is just really light. So what I did to try to alleviate it is I just banged the hell out of it on the ashtray and break that piece of, like, little piece of charcoal out of the cigar. And in this case, that is the little chunk of charcoal that I broke off. A lot of times, once you do that, the cigar gets kind of mangled on the end, and it takes a little while, a little coaxing with the cigar, or with the lighter, to get the cigar back burning properly again. As soon as I did that and I relit the cigar, I was getting tons of really dense, thick smoke. You know, ideal volumes of smoke, or ideal smoke conditions. I think it's probably, I don't know, probably the best way to put it. But since then, the smoke volume has sort of tapered off a little bit again, and it's been a little problematic. The flavor seems to kind of come and go with the smoke volume. Sometimes it seems really thick and dense, and then the flavor level is intense, and then when the smoke gets kind of airy, you get like very little flavor. And I don't know whether that's just a bum stick or what the case may be. I think that the age of the cigar may have a little something to do with the lack of flavor intensity that I remember, but it's certainly not, age is not causing these burn problems. I guess I just picked the wrong one to forget about. So when the flavor is, when the smoke volume is on and the flavor is on, it's pretty interesting. Through the sinus, I get a little bit of spiciness. It's got sort of like a campfire wood smoke sort of aroma to it. The only real distinct flavor that I'm getting out of it is sort of like a dark fruit, and it reminds me of a plum. If you ever just take a bite out of a plum, it's kind of sweet, but then you get a little bit of bitterness from the skin of the plum. I'm getting the same thing out of the cigar. It's got some sweetness, and then there's a little bit of bitterness sort of around the edges. It makes for an interesting smoke, but the core flavor is just, maybe, I guess the best way to put it is just sort of like a generic tobacco taste. There's really nothing standoutish about it, and it's a little on the boring side. The only thing that's keeping the cigar interesting are is that sort of plum fruity kind of flavor that I'm getting here and there. Body wise, it's probably medium to full. Flavor intensity again varies depending on how much smoke I'm getting out of the cigar at any given time. Body, finish, flavor intensity, I think. Oh, finish. I skipped right over that. It's creamy, which is nice. It's going well with the cigar, with coffee. It's going well with the cigar. The creamy flavor is going, or the creamy finish is going well with coffee. So in a nutshell, when the cigar is on and I'm getting a good smoke volume, everything is great. When the smoke volume is off, the cigar is barely mediocre. So far the cigar is very inconsistent and sporadic, and that's really not what I remember out of it. So that's where we're at for now. I'm going to come back one more time, and then we'll wrap up this video. I'll try to keep the next piece a little shorter so that the video doesn't wind up being 20 minutes on a cigar that you can't buy anymore, and more than half of which is me telling you about my experience buying it, back in 2006. So sit tight and I'll be right back. Well, I am back, and it seems as though the further I get away from that burn problem that I had earlier on, the better the cigar is burning. The burn line itself is still a little wavy. However, the ash now it holds a much tighter shape, and I'm not having as much of a problem with loose ash flaking off. It's staying pretty solid. The smoke volume is getting a little better. However, the cigar is a little finicky in terms of keeping it lit. I find that I have to pick it up and puff on it a little more frequently than I would like. Even with smoking, or even with puffing it more frequently, it doesn't seem to be heating up too much. And even now, I'm just kind of compelled to touch it up just a little bit, because I really don't imagine that it's going to be completely lit. It's just too much time in between when I puffed on it and now. So the smoke volume is better, it's thicker, it's nice and creamy, flavors coat the palate well. I'm still getting that sort of plum flavor every now and again. It's transitioning more to a woody flavor here and there, more so than the plum flavor being sporadic. And the core is still just a very generic tobacco flavor. The body is picking up a little bit. It's a little bit more towards full at this point. The flavor level has increased a bit. Finish is just as thick as it was earlier on, and just all in all, it's a bit more of a pleasant cigar at this point than it was earlier. There's really not a whole lot to say going forward. I mean, we're dealing with a cigar that's a little richer, it's burning a little better, but the core flavor really hasn't changed. The cigar doesn't take you down a long journey of different intricate flavors or different finesse here and there with a variety of flavors. It's more or less, I guess you could say, one-dimensional. There has been very little change, except for the addition of that woody flavor now, as opposed to earlier on. So with that said, I'm going to wrap up this practically extinct cigar and let you be on your way. So with that said, thanks for watching, happy smoking, and I will catch you later.